Hello there. I recently had the fortunate opportunity to talk to Jared over at Currently Rockhounding about Opal, and while we were chatting afterwards, he gave me a couple pieces of Fire Opal. He gave me this one, and then I asked for a couple other ones that were a little bit more gemmy to try to facet them. So that's what we're going to do today with these two pieces. The smaller one has a couple of fractures that might be catastrophic over on the thicker part of the sample, unfortunately. So this one might either turn out to be really small or just fall apart. But we're going to try a couple of things. One of these I'm going to cut in a design optimized for fluorite technically, but that's a similar refractive index to Opal, where Opal is 137 to 147 and fluorite is like 143 to 144 or something like that. So they kind of overlap and should work out okay. And that's kind of what I did with my Fire Opal from Mexico that I faceted recently and made a video about. This one was optimized for fluorite, but it works well in Opal too. The design for fluorite is called Princess Trilliant for Fluorite by Tony Collins, and the other one we're going to try is not optimized for fluorite, but it is a very bright design by Jeffrey Hill of Silver Hill Lapidary, who's really gotten into designing some interesting and relatively quick cuts, is important for me anyway, who says that the design is very bright and it's optimized for YAG, which is 178, 172, something like that. So it's quite a bit higher refractive index than Opal, but in looking at it on GCS, it doesn't look awful in Opal, to me anyway, and so we're going to try it and see if it brightens things up. Because one of the issues with Opal is that the bigger the stone, the chunkier the stone, the more opaque it is in a gemstone, and you get a lot of kind of cloudiness and haziness that can really dull the stone and make it look like it doesn't have any life. So I'm wondering if we do a design that's bright, but maybe not optimized, if that would look just as interesting in an Opal versus a design that is optimized for an Opal refractive index. And we'll see how they compare. Since Opal is relatively soft, somewhere 5.5 to 6 on the Mohs hardness scale, I'm hoping this will go relatively quickly, especially because these are small stones. So the first thing we have to do is make a flat surface for putting a dop on here, and then we can get started. This is a 360 grit disc. You can see in the background I have a green stone dopped up in the Raytech Shaw faceting piece here. And this was actually going to be the throwing star design in CTH YAG, because I found that to be kind of a dark stone, and so I was hoping that since the throwing star's design is supposed to be bright, that it would brighten it up a bit. Well, hello there, Internet. This is Narrator Pat. I thought I'd leave in the entire dopping process of this Opal. As you can see, it's on a little wax, bit of, actually from a piece of those like Baby Bell cheddar cheeses that's wadded up, and I kind of stuck it down into the wax and then used a flat dop to impress it in there and make sure the flat surface was level to where I wanted it to go. And now in the background there, over the alcohol lamp, I'm getting wax on the very small top of a 2 or 3 millimeter dop. Takes me a little bit just because you got to heat up the dop and the wax and get it at the right temperature, but not so hot that it melts or bubbles, because then it loses its kind of strength. And I'm not sure if I did this already, but I also will or need to center the stone under the dop, and so to do that I use one of the small dops and try to place that in the center of the stone of where I want the middle portion to be. But if you weren't aware, I got these opals from Jared because I went to interview him for a documentary that I released just last week, or recently, or in the past, whenever you're watching this. It's out now.
about the Wheeling Opal and the Moscow Opal mines and Washington Opal in general. And so let's see. It's like I got, so I got to kind of time it right where the wax goes down onto the opal just a little bit and spreads out, but doesn't spread out so much that you lose it all. This is a what's called a cold dopping method, where I'm going to use a hybrid wax and super glue. I've been using this super glue for about a year and a half now, so the top doesn't fit on there quite right, and I have to kind of jab it free and make a hole every time that I use it. But it still works. A lot of people say after a year they get new super glue, but this has been going strong for me so far, and I'm going to use it until I start losing strength or it just solidifies completely. And it doesn't take much super glue, just a little dot on the top, and then bring it down slowly, squish out a little bit, but you don't want to squeeze too hard because that'll either move the opal or press out all the glue around the outside. And I've also started adding just a little bit more glue around the edges just because I'm kind of paranoid about it and it doesn't really hurt anything. And then I'm going to use some accelerant to harden that quickly so it doesn't run down the sides or run away from the opal. But I found this method works best for me. Using this hybrid wax and super glue for initial dopping because it's quick. I don't have to heat up the stone, so I don't have to worry about cracking the stone like I did with previous stuff. And then when I transfer, I just transfer to super glue usually, unless it's a weird shaped stone, and then I might have to use some wax as well. But by just using super glue on the transfer, I can just heat up the wax on this initial dopping side and release the stone a lot easier rather than using super glue on both sides because I was having trouble removing super glue. So adding a little bit of heat softens the wax much faster than the super glue, so I don't heat up the stone and I can remove it a lot more cleanly. And this is about 4 minutes or so of going from adding wax to dopping, and then we're all set. And I just have to remove it from the wax. And basically, that's it. We'll be ready to go here. And with the hardener, it's ready to go in just a few seconds. And I could almost immediately go over to the machine and start faceting. So let's go do that. Here we are, roughing in the pavilion. I think this was after the 360 grit stage. And you can see there's just a little bit on the girdle there that's still a natural edge of the stone that I have to facet out. So the stone has to get a little bit smaller or I have to cut down. And I think I wound up doing both. And then I misindexed. So on the top there, in the very center of the stone, there's a misindex that I went around the entire outside and just made that mistake 6 more times to even it out. And it's not noticeable. But here we are with the table pretty much done. Skipped all the steps. And for the second stone in the Princess Trilliant for fluorite design, I wound up cutting off, or I actually dopped it up and then took a pair of pliers and broke it along a natural cleavage plane, or fracture plane actually, it doesn't have cleavage. But that worked out pretty well, and I was still able to get actually a bigger stone than the first stone that I faceted there. And this is our process of, got at the 600 stage on the pavilion, all polished up now, nice and shiny. This was the most difficult part of the table, the crown of the stone, where I had a little bit of a concave area that I had to keep cutting out. And you can see the green wax that I initially used to dop the stone for doing the pavilion is still there on the crown. And I just had to go until that was cut out completely, which was helpful. With the clear stone, you can see the green disappearing over time. And here it is almost out of the way just enough. I just have to move it out of the center of the stone because the star facets and accent facets will cut that out eventually. And this is just before I cut in those final facets, showing that it's going to be gone, and then it's gone, and the stone was pretty much done, polished up nice. and it's basically the same color as my little pill bottle of acetone, so it disappeared pretty quick. And this is the final result with 2 opals from Washington State faceted in 2 different designs. The Throwing Stars design was actually brighter than the Princess Trilliant for Fluorite design, but I think in part that was mostly due to the stone differences. One was more hazier than the other is all. You kind of have to make your peace with opals that they're not going to be flashy, but they are interesting. So thanks for watching.